George Wallace Bowers was born in Lower Hutt on the 4th of June 1928. The house was built by his dad and granddad and is still standing today. He was the only child of George Wallace Bowers, who was a master builder, and Ada Martha Agnes Lillian Bowers, who was a gentle and loving mother. At a young age, Dad shifted to live in and had a good group of close mates who would kick around a rugby ball or practice boxing together. Dad was a good sprinter, but he had extended spells when he was bedridden with asthma and given cod liver oil, which he hated. Dad's chores at home included milking the family cow and collecting eggs from the bantams, and during the war years they made butter and shared it with local families. Luckily, World War II ended when Dad was 17, so he didn't have to head off overseas. Dad went to teachers' college after he finished school, initially more because his mates were going than any strong desire to become a teacher. He recently told me that he and his friends were not A-grade students, but they were A-grade mates, and by all accounts they enjoyed a great social life together. Dad did enjoy teaching once he started, and showed an aptitude in the classroom and a genuine care and commitment to his students. Over the years, people have out of the blue got in touch with Dad to thank him for the impact he had on their lives, some of them from over 30 or 40 years ago. When the opportunity arose to spend a year teaching in Scotland, Dad jumped at the chance to connect with his Scottish roots and live in Aberdeen for a year. It was not long after returning, Dad was introduced to Mum by mutual friends, and the rest, as they say, is history. After a courtship of less than a year, Mum commented to Dad that she was thinking of shifting from teaching into radio work, and Dad replied that she should forget about that and marry him instead. The happy couple were married in New Plymouth on the 14th of January 1961. Life got a lot busier after that as Dad's career took off with promotions to principal positions in schools in Palmerston North. He was also a rugby ref and a rep rugby selector and coach. And on top of that, he studied and completed a BA and a Diploma of Education. And along with all this, Mum and Dad had 3 beautiful daughters, and then 6 years later, a son as well. Two years after I was born, in 1974, Dad took a school inspector position in Whanganui and shifted into what would be our family home for 39 years on Drury Hill. It was also the start of a dear friendship with Lou and Pat Robinson, who lived across the road, and they were to share many drinks, meals and laughs with Mum and Dad. From the early years as a teacher, through being a headmaster and a school inspector, and then in retirement to teaching at the community college and the prison, Dad spent over 55 years of his life helping and teaching people. At one point after retirement, Dad was actively involved with 17 different community groups, and it wasn't until he nearly died of pneumonia that he considered cutting down his commitments. Dad has loved being a part of Rotary, Age Concern, Christian Social Services, Probus, and the Men's Shed, as well as many other groups. He freely gave of his time and experience and his quiet wisdom. Through all this, Dad never sought recognition, and he was always quick to name others who he felt did more than him. When he was recognised with a mayoral award, he wasn't even going to tell his own kids, but we did all get to share in his Paul Harris Fellowship at Rotary, for which he was immensely proud. Dad also downplayed the fact he'd won 8 medals for breaststroke at the New Zealand Masters Games, including 3 golds. Dad's generosity, his integrity, humility and his community spirit are going to be missed by many in Whanganui, because he gave so much of his time and he expected nothing in return. Dad was a gentleman in every sense of the word. His values and behaviour might be considered old-fashioned nowadays, but they were an inherent part of who he was. He always listened and never talked over people, and he quietly earned respect from people of all walks of life. I was at times amazed that Dad did not think he was special at all. If one of us kids would talk about what a great dad he was, he would genuinely be taken aback, because he honestly thought he was a fairly ordinary person. In our family, Dad offered his 4 children and his extended family unconditional love and support. And when I reflect on our childhood, it really was rather idyllic. Dad's quirky sense of humour was a key part of our family life. Dad had lots of silly sayings. As a father, he offered me this sage advice, that I should be a man and not his underpants. If Dad was unwell and you asked him if he was all right, he was likely to say, "No, I'm half left." And later at the hospice, when he was told that he had 1 to 3 months to live, the doctor asked how he felt about that. And without batting an eyelid, Dad replied, "Well, it's better than tomorrow." As a young man, I would debate issues with Dad, and I sometimes thought he was a little naive, because he always presumed that people were good. I later came to realise it was simply because Dad trusted people. He gave everyone a chance because he believed in the goodness of all people. And although Dad loved words, he chose to teach us kids through his actions and example. He and Mum supported us in our decisions and then were there to help if things didn't work out. Dad was always so proud of us, not for any high achievements, but simply for trying to be good people and trying to be good parents for our own kids. I'm going to sorely miss the affectionate smile and the look of pride each time we arrived in Whanganui and were first greeted by Mum and Dad. Dad never took things or people for granted. He taught us to be grateful for loved ones and good health, grateful for time spent together. He was an optimist. He was always looking for the positive things in life, and he's lived a good life. For me personally, Dad gave the gift of his time. This was partly due to the fact I was a lot younger than my sisters. Having me at the age of 44 meant he wasn't the youngest or trendiest of dads, but he was always there for me. The day I was born, he told me he had a fishing rod for me, and many of the happiest times of my life were spent fishing together. Dad was my first friend, and for over half my life referred to me as his little mate. It was a term of endearment I loved into adulthood, and I always felt proud that Dad thought of me as a mate. Dad was a role model for me as a man, a husband and a father. Through his love of Mum, he demonstrated how a loving, supportive marriage could thrive, and together they created a home that was warm and safe and reassuring for all of us kids. Dad absolutely adored Mum, and he showed it constantly in his actions and words. For over 53 years of married life, Dad genuinely believed he was the luckiest man alive, and they would still buy each other Valentine's and birthday cards with carefully thought words on them. I need to pay tribute to Mum. She has always cared for Dad and made him feel well loved, and over the past months we have all admired her strength, care and patience looking after Dad. Mum's been an incredible source of strength for all of us. I don't want to live in a world without Dad. The world was simply a better place when he was in it. Just knowing he was there at the end of the phone was enough. If I ever needed advice or wanted to share a success or a funny story. I am sad my girls won't get more time with their granddad George and won't get to share their own successes with him, nor have more cuddles and laughs. Rugby games and fishing trips won't be quite the same, as I won't be able to discuss them with Dad afterwards. But I'm so grateful for the time I have had. I feel truly blessed to have had Dad. For all of us kids, his quiet wisdom and his integrity, his gentle kindness and warm humour were like the sun lighting the way ahead and warming our backs with reassurance. For me, I'll find Dad in the laughing faces of my own 3 girls. I'll still ask him for guidance with decisions, and I'll still think about how he would act in certain situations. When I'm out fishing, I know he'll be there with me too. Maybe I'll ask him to help me hook a big one. Farewell, my old mate. I'll talk to you soon. I love you, Dad.
just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tumble and fall, or the mountain should crumble